Hey, welcome back everyone. Today, in this video, what I want to talk about is the powerhouse of the cell. You guys call it the mitochondria. You've told me over and over again, and something you learned in middle school, if not before that, that this organelle right here, the mitochondria, is the powerhouse of the cell. And so today, in this video, I want to go over why we call it that, how it got that name. The cellular process that happens in the mitochondria is referred to as cellular respiration. And the definition of that really can be it's the process by which sugar gets broken down, and the energy released as that sugar gets broken down is used through a series of reactions to produce adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. And that's the molecule that cells use really when they need to get something done. That's the energy molecule for cells. And so the mitochondria gets the name, the powerhouse of the cell, because it's the organelle that makes or produces all of the ATP that the cell uses. And cellular respiration is the process that does that. So in this video, I just kind of want to go over a really brief overview of what this equation is, what cellular respiration is, how it happens, and a little bit of details on that. Before we get started, though, I want to go over a misconception that people have. Every year when I teach this, I have some students or somebody ask me, well, photosynthesis is what plants do and respiration is what animals do. And no, really it's not that way. This is a plant cell here, and we know that because it's, one, green, and two, it has a cell wall, and it's got chloroplasts in here. But plant cells also have a mitochondria, and I wanted to point that out to you. Any kind of eukaryotic organism, plants, animals, fungi, and protists, all have a mitochondria. And the mitochondria is this organelle where cellular respiration takes place. In animal cells, we see the mitochondria as well. And so really, this process, cellular respiration, happens in all eukaryotic organisms, and a variation of it even happens in prokaryotic organisms. All living cells need ATP to do their jobs, and there's got to be some kind of reaction that's used to break down carbohydrates and turn the energy from that, or use the energy from that, to produce ATP so that cells can do what they need to. So I just kind of want to get rid of that misconception that cellular respiration only happens in animal cells. It's actually happening in any cell that has a mitochondria, and all eukaryotic organisms have mitochondria. And then, like I said, there's even a process that happens in bacteria that breaks down sugars and produces ATP as well. So, let's dive right into this, the chemical equation for respiration. When you hear the term respiration, a lot of you will probably think of breathing. And really, this is just, it explains why we breathe at a cellular level. And so, part of the reactants, of cellular respiration is glucose, or sugar, really any carbohydrate, but we break it down into that glucose level, and oxygen. Oxygen is the gas that we breathe in. And so if I ask you guys why we breathe, well, we need oxygen. Well, why do we need oxygen? So we can stay alive. Yes, that's true, and this is why. So we need oxygen for this chemical reaction of cellular respiration. And so now, when somebody asks you why we breathe oxygen, you can say, oh, we need it for respiration so we can break down sugars and make energy. You don't just have to give that simple answer of, oh, we need it to stay alive. This is why. And then the other part of this, what gets produced as the mitochondria is breaking down sugars and using the oxygen in this chemical reaction, carbon dioxide gets produced. That's the gas that we breathe out. Also water. And if you've ever breathed on some glass, you can see the condensation from your breath. That's just the water that you're breathing out. And so some of the byproducts of breaking down sugar, breaking down these carbohydrates for food, are going to be carbon dioxide and water. And then the big one here is adenosine triphosphate. It's the energy that the molecule that has the energy that cells need. So this is why we call the mitochondria the powerhouse again. And so, long story short, when we talk about respiration at the cellular level, we're using the oxygen in this chemical equation to break down sugar further, and then some of the byproducts are going to be carbon dioxide and water, and we use the energy that's released from that to make this adenosine triphosphate molecule. I'm going to go into that in a lot more detail in another video about the stages of cellular respiration, but really in this overview I just want you guys to get a basic idea of what's going on. Now, if we take a look at this chemical equation and put it into chemical formulas here, the sugar that we're breaking down, glucose, has a chemical formula of C6H12O6. And for each glucose molecule that gets broken down, we're going to need 6 oxygen molecules to produce the maximum amount of ATP. And really, this should say 36 or 38 ATP. It really depends on some of the pathways that some electrons take as this chemical reaction happens. But the cell's going to make roughly about 36 molecules of ATP for every glucose molecule. And the cell releases 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 6 molecules of water for each one of these. And so what I've done here is I've drawn little arrows to show that the green parts go in here, the reactants, glucose and oxygen, go into the mitochondria, and from that we have ATP that gets produced down here at the bottom, and our byproducts of carbon dioxide and water. So that's your basic reaction for cellular respiration. Now, I want to look at what can happen when you run short of oxygen. There's really 2 types of respiration. We have what's called aerobic respiration, which is the full equation here. And when we break this word down, aerobic, really it sounds like air, is what a lot of people will tell me all the time. And it does. And so really what makes me think of is with air, I need to breathe in oxygen. So aerobic respiration is happening when oxygen is present. In most cases, as long as your body is functioning normally and the cells are getting the oxygen that they need, this is the type of cellular respiration that's going to happen. And so if oxygen is present, we have the full set of reactants here, so the entire reaction can happen, and it produces the full set of products, which is going to be 36 to 38 molecules of ATP. So we have that maximum amount of energy that gets produced from breaking down 1 molecule of sugar. Now, what happens though is if you're exercising or you're working out or you're running a lot or you're doing something and you're using up the oxygen faster than it can be replaced, then your cells still need energy. They still need to work. And if we run out of oxygen, we don't want it to stop making energy. And so our cells actually will go into what's called, or the mitochondria will go through the process called anaerobic respiration. If we break this word apart, if we put the prefix "an" in front of it, that means not. And so this is respiration that happens when oxygen is not present. So we don't have oxygen. And this can happen because you're working out, and even though you're breathing heavier and your heart's pumping faster to get the blood to move through your lungs and collect the oxygen and move that oxygen from there to the muscles that need it, even though you're moving faster, your cells are using the oxygen faster than it can be replaced. And that's why you breathe heavier, and that's why your heart races as you do aerobic exercises, because you're trying to replace the oxygen and get rid of the carbon dioxide that's being produced. But if your cells are using this faster than it can be replaced, they're going to go through what's called aerobic respiration. And what happens, and I'll go into why this is later on in a different video, but if oxygen's not present, all the stages of cellular respiration can't happen. The only stage that happens is the first one, and that's called glycolysis. And that stage only produces a maximum of, well, you have a net gain of 2 ATP molecules instead of 36. And so for every sugar that gets broken down in anaerobic respiration, you're only going to end up with 2 molecules of ATP instead of that 36 to 38. And so if you think about this, if, let's say, you're running a marathon, by the end of it, you're going into anaerobic respiration, and so your leg muscles may not feel nearly as strong. Your legs feel kind of wobbly like noodles or like Jell-O. That's because you're not producing the maximum amount of ATP there. You're running out of energy. And so as you breathe more and more and slow down the use of those muscles, you can replenish this oxygen and go back into aerobic respiration. But in the short term, you're running low on energy there. In animals, what happens during anaerobic respiration, and another byproduct of that, since we don't have the carbon dioxide and water that's actually being produced by the other stages of cellular respiration, you're making 2 ATP molecules, and then the other byproduct is lactic acid. And if you're an athlete, your coaches have told you that your muscles are sore the next day from working out because of lactic acid building up in your muscles. And that's true. You worked out so hard that you put your muscles through anaerobic respiration, and therefore you have all this lactic acid in your tissue, and that's making your muscles sore. And so they're right when they say the way to get rid of that is to work out again, because as you work out, you increase the blood flow to the area. The blood's picking up the lactic acid and trying to get it out of your system. And so in animals, that's what we see with anaerobic respiration. In plants and in yeast, when they go through anaerobic respiration, they break down the sugar, they produce 2 molecules of ATP, and instead of the carbon dioxide and water being released there, they're also going to produce alcohol. And so that's where alcoholic fermentation comes. It's a result of anaerobic respiration in plants and yeast. So just to recap here, the reaction for cellular respiration is this. It's C6H12O6 plus 6O2, or really glucose plus oxygen, is going to end up producing 36 ATP molecules and releasing 6 carbon dioxide and 6 water molecules here as byproducts. There's 2 different versions of that. We have the aerobic respiration. In that case, we're going to have all the stages of respiration happen, and we're going to produce the most amount of ATP because that oxygen is present. And if oxygen gets used up or we're running out of oxygen, then we're going to go through what's called anaerobic respiration, which is still breaking down the sugar, producing some ATP, and then depending on what type of organism you are, either producing lactic acid or alcohol. And all of this happens in the mitochondria of your cells.